So let me just go ahead and ask you, my man, why do you believe specifically that the Antichrist is going to be from a revived Roman Empire?
So it's for a lot of reasons. And the iron mingled with clay is Rome and religion mixed together, which is the Holy Roman Empire. That and then now, so when I look at that, I see okay, it was and is not, yet it is. So it's alive, it dies, and then it's reborn.
I think you're referring to Revelation 17. Is that what you're referring
Yeah,
to?
I think so. And so I believe that the Holy Roman Empire was officially reborn in 2009. It also could be the League of Nations that died and then was rebirthed into the United Nations. The whole point of it was to end war.
Then you essentially believe that the beast within Daniel 2, because this really comes down to what is the identity of the fourth beast. The last days division of this Roman Empire is the Holy Roman Empire revived currently today.
Yes.
This little horn is rising up from this 10-nation coalition. Not to mention that within Daniel 11 and within Daniel 9, we see that this beast comprises of the kings of Greece and the kings of Medo-Persia, which Medo-Persia is Iran, Greece, Yavon, that's Asia Minor, Turkey. So I believe all the pieces fit together to show that this beast is in fact the Islamic Caliphate.
You believe that the iron legs are the Islamic State, right?
You know, it talks about how there's a fundamental division. You know, within Daniel 7, it says his kingdom will be divided. That's essentially what we see within Islam currently, is that there's the Sunnis and there's the Shia split. Revelation is saying, look, this looks like a lion, this looks like a bear, this looks like a leopard. We're supposed to use the kingdoms that Daniel was given within the framework. So when you put the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, and the Grecian empires together, you get the current borders of the former Islamic Caliphate. You don't get the borders of the Roman Empire.
This is why I believe it has to be the Holy Roman Empire. Is because, okay, so for the economic reason, like I told you, the religious reason, I don't see that it's possible for the Muslim world to dominate nations and tongues.
What exactly is the Catholic Church deceiving us today on? Like, to you, what is the foundational antichristic spirit? The spirit of the Antichrist is described as specifically denying the Father and the Son. Okay? And if you look at the Catholic Church, there isn't a fundamental denial of the relationship between the Father and the Son. There just isn't. But when we look at Islam, the religion literally is saying you can have your way to the Father, but you can do it without the Son. All right, what is going on, everybody? We have a special conversation today. We are going to be discussing two of the most controversial topics when it comes to the Antichrist. And believe me, many of you who click on this video probably are like totally ready to see what's going to happen in this debate, because it's probably about to get crazy. But anyway, my name is Jericho. I believe in the coming Islamic Antichrist. I believe that the Antichrist will be a Muslim. And my brother over here, Jesse, he believes that the Antichrist will be from kind of a revived European Roman Empire. So let me just go ahead and ask you, my man, why do you believe specifically that the Antichrist is going to be from a revived Roman Empire?
So it's for a lot of reasons. And it's kind of tough to just pick one reason. But I would say I have to look at what is evident today. And so I know that in Daniel 12, when he asked God, what's the meaning of all this? God told him to seal it up, for it is those in the end time. And so it's going to be things that we can identify in our day. And so, or else Daniel would have already knew about it and wouldn't had no need to ask God about it. So, I do believe it's going to be stuff that we can see today that only we could see because, for example, the nations that we see in Daniel 7. I know that you defer on this, but I believe that these nations actually exist today. So, with that being said, I also, when I look at the European Union, it's not actually there's a common thing that I see going on, and it's you have the statue, which you had the iron legs, and then you had the iron mingled with clay. I know that you differ on how you interpret that,
Hmm.
but I view that as the legs of being iron being Rome, and then the iron mingled with clay is Rome and religion mixed together, which is the Holy Roman Empire. That that began in 800 AD, and it ended in somewhere around 1806. And so um, there's a place in Scripture. I just looked it up. But it said that it was and is not, but yet is, and it was referring to the
Right.
kingdom, the great beast.
I think you're
Uh,
referring to Revelation 17. Is that what you're
yeah,
referring
I
to?
think so. I think
Right.
so.
Okay. Okay.
And I think it was referring to the beast with the horns and all that. Um, that and then now, so when I look at that, I see okay, it was and is not, yet it is. So it's alive, it dies, and then it's reborn. That's the way I see that, and so that's how I see the Holy Roman Empire. And so I believe that the Holy Roman Empire was officially reborn in um, 2009 when
Oh
they
wow. Okay.
when the,
Recently.
yeah, when the European Union actually, all the nations came and they signed a constitution, and so now they actually have um, a prime minister and a president for the European Union. Um, and so I see that, and I look back, and I see one of the things the reason I view this is it's also because of war. So when you think about the United Nations, they actually started, and this is actually another interpretation that could be for is not, and yet is. It also could be the League of Nations that died and then was rebirthed into the United Nations. The whole point
Hmm.
of it uh, was to end
Hmm.
world wars, because there was the Franco-German War in 1870, killed about 1 million people, and then you had World War One, and after that, they try to come out with the League of Nations to say um, we have to stop this from happening again because our weapons kept getting more and more powerful, and
Hmm.
so their intentions were in the beginning to try to prevent extermination, because we were starting to develop atomic bombs and
Right.
things like that.
Hmm.
And so they're like, man, the only way we can do this is if we unify the nations. And so there's a lot that goes into that. But then it got shut down because of America. America, they knew that in order for this to happen, that we would have to give up our sovereignty. So we would have to submit to the one world order.
Hmm.
And I don't think it was actually called the one world order at the time, but that's what it's called now. And so then that got shot down, and then it was revived in 1945 after World War II. So now there's another war that happened, and they're like, man, 40 million died this time.
Hmm.
So we gotta figure out how to. We can't let this happen again. It's going to get worse the next time, and I do believe that time is coming for World War III. I believe that that's the sixth trumpet. So when I think about the Antichrist, I think about it in this perspective. And so then you have the United Nations and you have the EU. So here's the reason I say it. So it has to be, for me, it has to be economic. They have to control the economics of the world, or at least have the main their whatever currency they have, which I believe is going to be the euro. If it's not the euro, then maybe
Okay. Hmm.
maybe digital currency or whatever. I don't know for sure, but
Right.
it would have to be political, and it would have to be religion, because these are the three main reasons why there's war: is economics, politics, and religion.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when I see that, I look at the Holy Roman Empire that's been officially reborn um, since 2009. When I look at that, I see all three of these things, these characteristics in that. So that's why I believe the the Antichrist is going to come from the Holy Roman Empire.
Okay. I think that's really good. So, in order for our audience to understand, you essentially believe that the beast within Daniel 2, because this really comes down to what is the identity of the fourth beast or of the beast of the iron and clay, right? Because we have within Daniel 2, we see that there's the 10 toes, right? And then also within Daniel 7, we see there's the fourth beast. And so the last days division of this Roman Empire is the Holy Roman Empire revived currently today?
Yes.
Is okay, so and then you believe that the Antichrist is actually coming from this, like what specifically is he coming from? He's gonna come from the European Union or what?
I don't know for sure where the Antichrist is going to come exactly, because I believe it's going to be shaped around differently after that war happens.
Right. So you don't have like specifics like, oh, he's gonna come from like Romania, but you think there's gonna be a general assembly of 10 nations arising from this European conglomerate, right? That eventually is gonna lead to the revealing of the Antichrist.
Yeah, I think that I don't think it's necessarily somebody from Romania.
Mm-hmm.
I It seems like the Pope will be from Italy. I think they've only had one Pope that's not from Italy.
Mm-hmm.
But we there's no I don't really know that for sure.
The reason why I differ, right, and this is kind of where I'm going to go into my view for the audience, is I think the Roman centric view of the end times actually completely misses the point of the entire Bible, right? And like these are really strong words, but I think that it's really important for us to understand where the foundation of all biblical prophecy comes from. And so, like, what a lot of people will do is they'll be like, "Oh, let's read Revelation, let's read Daniel, and let's make our prophecies off of these two foundational books, which are really good, and I believe we should be doing that." However, most people completely disregard the other 40 to 30 books that were written in the Old Testament, right? Especially the prophets. And so, this is what I'm going to get into. Is I think when we build our foundation of biblical prophecy on the prophets, we actually get a much clearer view of what's going to happen in the end times. So, for instance, let's start with Joel, right? If you read the entire book of Joel, the first thing he says, or towards the end of the prophecy, it basically says, "Hasten and come, all of you surrounding nations, and gather yourselves there. Let the nations stir themselves up and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all of these surrounding nations." We move on to Zechariah 12:2. "Behold, I'm about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah." Okay, so we move over to Numbers, right? This is actually the first 5 books in the Torah. "I will advise you what this people, the Hebrews," and he's talking to the Israelites about the end of days, "what the Israelites will do to your people, the Moabites, in the days to come," which literally translates to the end of time. He says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel." This is talking about the Messiah, right? This is Jesus Christ. He's in the last days, he's going to rule from Jerusalem. And the foundational message of the end times is that the Antichrist is going to lead a coalition of nations. He's going to lead against Jerusalem to do what? To wipe out the Jewish people. So when we have this Jerusalem centric focus that the Old Testament gives us, then we move over into the New Testament. And I'm also going to bring Daniel into this as well, because a lot of people think like, oh, Daniel is like all New Testament, but Daniel is one of the prophets. And so if we actually look at Daniel 7, right? Daniel 7 essentially gives us a picture of 4 beasts, of 4 future world empires that are going to come onto the world stage. And these 4 empires are going to be up until the time when the great rock or the mountain is going to come down, it's going to crush them. And that's the rock, the mountain of Christ, right? So, anyway, when we look at the identity of the 4th beast, right, it says this 4th beast was terrifying and frightening, very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts. It had 10 horns. So again, this beast is the same beast we see in Revelation 13. The beast that rises out of the sea has 10 horns, 7 heads. Now, when we go to Revelation 17 to get further instruction on what this beast actually is, it tells us exactly what this beast is. It says right here, this calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads of the beast are 7 hills on which the woman sits. Now, again, I believe you kind of touched on this. The woman is essentially Mystery Babylon, right? She's the scarlet woman that sits on the beast. And, the kings of the earth are drunk on the wine of her fornication, right? She is committing adultery with the nations of the earth. What is this adultery she's committing? It's essentially spiritual adultery with the surrounding nations. She's a false religious system, and she is the greatest false religious system that Satan has ever devised. Now, I know we're going to get into who or what we think this false religious system is, because you would believe that this would be the Roman Catholic Church, I assume, correct?
Yeah.
And then obviously, I would believe that this would be the false religion of Islam, right? And we can kind of go into that in a little bit greater detail. Anyway, so these 10 horns, right, that come out of one of the heads of the beast. This is basically what I'm getting to is why I think this is a Middle East beast. Is that these 10 horns in Daniel 11, and also Ezekiel 38 are actually mentioned, right? We have Persia, Cush, Put, we have Lud, we have all of these nations which within Ezekiel's day are Middle Eastern Muslim majority nations, correct? Cush was the name of Ethiopia, Sudan. Put was the name of Libya, of modern day Libya. Persia, that encompassed everything from Iran, up into Pakistan, Afghanistan, the Persian Empire. So when we look at the main biblical arc, essentially, of what I'm saying, is we see the surrounding nations are going to be the primary nations that are going to be the ones that come against Jerusalem. They're named, right? We have Iran, Libya, Cush. Even within Daniel 11, I'll put the verse up here. When the Antichrist within Daniel 7, who's described as the little horn, right? He's the little horn that arises from the remaining 10 horns. It says that he puts down 3 kings. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, this must be referring to the 10 tribes that came out of the Roman Empire when they fell, like the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths. But I actually believe within Daniel, it actually tells us the 3 nations that he puts down. And in Daniel 11, it says those nations are Cush, Put, and Egypt. And within Isaiah, we see a massive prophecy of Egypt in the last days getting invaded by the Antichrist. Within Micah 5:5, the invader of Jerusalem is literally called the Assyrian. So I believe when we put the entire Bible together, it points us to this future Assyrian empire that within modern days, what that means is an Islamic coalition of nations that's going to come against Jerusalem under an Islamic Antichrist, and maybe we can go into this further, an Islamic false prophet.
Okay.
Did that kind of make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I get your point on the missing the point because um, I do believe that there's a lot of traditions that are passed down from the Catholic Church. We kind of like the pre-tribulation thing, or whatever, so we can kind of it's possible that we can be believing something that's really not biblical. You know what I mean?
Correct.
It's more
Yeah.
tradition. So I
Okay, so I want to point us then to a specific verse within Revelation 17, because I think 17 is a really good book in the Bible that kind of is trying to describe who the beast actually is. So within Revelations, it says, "This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, one is, and the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain only a little while. The beast who once was, now is the 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to destruction." So, what's kind of your view on this verse?
I think that um, it's possible that we don't know for sure. I think that there's possibility. So I think one of the possibilities would be the EU or the um, the Soviet Union, or what I think is most likely is I believe that that is the nations. So from even before Babylon, there was you had Egypt, and
So you had
Assyria.
Egypt, Assyria,
Assyria, yeah.
Babylon, Medo Persia, and
Hmm.
Greece. Is that kind of what you're saying?
So yeah, and so that's what I believe with that. So that when it says the eighth, he is of the eighth, but he's the eighth, but he's of the seventh. So
Hmm.
that's where I think that it comes in with the Roman Empire and the Holy Roman Empire. But
Okay, so okay, yeah.
it could be kings. So here's the tricky part with this is that I know that kings, you know, it's basically nations, but
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
could mean rulers of, like right now we call them presidents
Hmm.
or prime ministers or whatever. But so it could be. That's why I said it's possible for EU because they've EU and the Soviet Union all had the same amount of kings, so
Hmm.
of leaders. So it could be uh, from one of those possibilities too.
Okay. Well, let me give you my interpretation. From my perspective, when it says this calls for a mind with wisdom, the seven heads are seven hills on which the woman sits. So we see this woman, right? And again, we've like we both agreed that this woman is the false religious system of the last days, right? Mystery Babylon, and so she's sitting on seven hills. And so if we look at what it says right here, these hills are also seven kings. And so, like I've noticed when a lot of people bring up the Roman Antichrist theory, they're like, "Oh, well, Rome sits on seven hills, so clearly this is the city of Rome." But then I have mainly two responses to that. The first one is, Germany, Mecca, like literally all of these other cities claim to be sat on seven hills. I think if you go on Wikipedia right now, I'll put it up here. There's like 50 plus cities that claim to be sitting on seven hills. But anyway, the main reason why I don't believe this is that the verse actually says they are seven kings. But then there's kind of a mystery because it says five have fallen, one is. So essentially what I believe, and the majority of the people that I've come across, including like mainstream scholarship on this subject, basically point to the fact that these eight total kings that we see are representations of kings and kingdoms that have persecuted the Jewish people and that are satanic and are trying to rule the world, right? And so we essentially see that five have fallen, and I think you were correct in your interpretation, where the first of these, according to the Bible, was Egypt, right? Egypt was the first empire that tried to persecute the Jews and kill them. You had Assyria, which was next. Then you have Babylon, the exile. Medo Persia, which we see in Daniel. That was the one that had power over Jerusalem for a period of time. And then we had Greece, all right, which is Alexander the Great. So that's the five kings. Then there's the one that is. So these five kings and kingdoms have fallen. There's one that is. And the one that is was essentially Rome, because that was the king that was alive within the time that he was given the prophecy, right?
Hmm.
So then, so so I'm pretty sure it's clear that we can identify the sixth king as Rome. But then we see that there are two more kings. We see that there's the seventh and then there's the eighth. Now, there's another mystery here because it says the seventh is of the eighth, right? And so this is kind of like what does that mean? And if we look at the verse, one is now the other, referencing the sixth king. The other has not yet come, but when he does, he must remain only a little while. The beast who once was the five kings now is not the Roman Empire and is about to go to destruction. That's the seventh and the eighth kings. Um, he's about to go to destruction.
Hmm.
So essentially, I don't believe, and this is kind of the main point, I don't believe that we can say that the sixth, seventh, and the eighth kings can be Roman, because that doesn't make any sense, right? You have to have the Rome that was at the time when Jerusalem was sacked in 70 AD, then replaced by another revived Rome, which is the seventh, and then replaced by the eighth, which so that's three like integrations of the Roman Empire. Whereas I believe it's way more likely that there was Rome, then there's going to be a seventh persecuting empire that's going to rise up that historically will persecute the Jews and will try to wipe them out. And then there's going to be an eighth, which is the last day's integration of the seventh, because the seventh and the eighth are mentioned as being one. They're of the same. And so you have to ask yourself, after the Roman Empire, I mean, there's really only one candidate, and that is the candidate of the Islamic Caliphate, which essentially was the one that took over when the fall of Constantinople happened. It was under the Ottoman Empire, which was the Islamic Caliphate. Now, I think what's important, and I'll finish with this, is you were talking about how the Antichrist had to be both the political, economic, and spiritual leader, right? That is essentially the perfect description of the office of the Caliph, right? Because the Caliph, which essentially means successor, which is the successor to Muhammad, is a pope, president, and general all put into one, right? He's the guy, he's the main guy. So I believe that the only way to make sense of Revelation 17 within this framework of who the beast is, you have to make sense of the last two kings, which I believe are
Okay,
Islamic in
so
nature.
just to clarify, I don't believe that one person is going to make up all those three things. What I meant by that was the empire. The empire is going to have all three of those characteristics. And so I do believe that the false prophet and the antichrist are going to be two separate people. And
Mm-hmm.
so, because it talks about the one that come and appears like the lamb, but has two horns, will speak like the beast and will try to cause the nations to submit to the antichrist. And so, to submit to the first beast, I believe is what it says. And so, I do believe that they're separate. I don't believe they're the same thing, the same people. But
Okay.
so, with the eighth being like that of the seventh or something like that, right? I don't know exactly how it's worded. I view so this so I'm thinking about the statue, right? That Daniel interpreted. That's what I'm thinking of. And he's not mentioning the two prior ones because he was already in his day with Babylon. And so he wasn't mentioning Egypt and Assyria because there was no need to. Um, but and also, all these empires are going to have to be empires that uh, are considered to have power over the world at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So like
So
Babylon
I
and
would
all.
actually disagree with you on this, but continue. We can come back to this.
Okay, and so there was no reason for him to really mention that for God to show Nebuchadnezzar the two previous nations. He could have if he wanted, but he didn't. It made sense to for him to show him the statue, the head of gold, which was his. Persia, then Greece, then Rome, who are you believe it's I think it's Islam or something, right? And
Yeah, so I would completely skip. I would put Rome as not even a part of the statue.
okay,
So I would put the legs of iron as the Islamic Caliphate.
okay. So yeah, and I would want to come back to this and ask you exactly which nation it is you think, stuff like that, because there's a lot of Muslim nations, but uh, so I believe that the iron legs are Rome, and then the Holy Roman Empire in 800 AD when they crowned Charlemagne and he became the religious leader along with the Roman political leader, and it was like that up until 1806. And I believe that's the iron mingled with clay, so the religion and the government mixed together.
Right, church and state.
Yeah, and so then because it said it's weak and frail, and we all know what happens when you mix.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so then then it ceased to exist in 1806, and now there's this reborn or whatever um, Holy Roman Empire. But then like I said, I believe that this war that's coming is going to change everything in the world. And so it's going to be they're going to be like, okay, well, we're going to have it's going to force nations that refuse to um, to submit to the world order.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to force them to submit to it because
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be so catastrophic, and it's going to be through nuclear war
Mm-hmm.
that that they're going to feel like they have no choice. But the only way to prevent war like that again, so that we don't exterminate each other, is going to be to unify all the nations. And so the king that's of the seventh is going to be that Antichrist who stands on the temple and all that. And I see your argument with the Muslim thing as well. But I also know how involved and how many and I would love to get into a bunch of these details about how the United Nations, they hate Israel, and the EU, they hate Israel.
Yeah,
And
you
so
can't deny that. I mean, especially with what's
yeah,
going on like today, like you can't deny it.
yeah, so the eighth one is going to be like that of the seventh. So I do believe it's going to be a little bit different than the current uh, Holy Roman Empire, the European Union that has actually a constitution right now.
Mhm.
I believe that after that war, it's going to change things. It's going to force nations to submit to the world order, and the Antichrist, his government is going to be like that of the Holy Roman Empire, but it's going to be a little bit different too. I don't think it's going to be the exact same. So that's what I'm saying is it would be like that of the seventh.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I think we really have to kind of nitpick into what. So, I mean, obviously, again, in my perspective, in order to believe that, you would have to believe that the sixth, seventh, and the eighth kings are mentioning some form of a Roman Empire. Whether that's, you have Rome, the Holy Rome or Roman Empire, and then the revived Holy Roman Empire. I just believe, at least in my perspective, that the seventh and the eighth kings are both distinct, and those distinctions are the future Islamic Caliphate, which is a revived version of the former Islamic Caliphate. Now, what's
yeah,
interesting is if we look at the Roman Empire, which everybody thinks this was the longest lasting empire in world history, it wasn't. Actually, the one that came after it, which is the Islamic Caliphate, if we take the Islamic Caliphate, it was the longest lasting, uh, you know, essentially state governing body that ever existed. It existed in many different forms, like the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Ottomans. But again, so did the Western and Eastern Roman empires. But people put those two together, so I believe it's okay for us to put the Islamic Caliphate together in the same way.
hmm
But yeah, I mean that's an interesting perspective. I think you have. Um, I think a lot of this distinction is going to come down to who we think the fourth beast is in Daniel 7. We see right here within the fourth beast. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there was before me a fourth beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. Now, while I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little horn. Pretty much both of us agree that's the Antichrist, right?
yeah, the
Just
little
talk
horn is
about that.
Antichrist, I believe.
You believe the little horn is the Antichrist?
Yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, we agree with the same thing. So this little horn, the Antichrist, arises in the midst of 10 horns, which are 10 kings, on this fourth beast that Daniel's describing. Now, the reason why I believe that this fourth beast actually does not reference the Roman Empire, um, because basically what I've seen is everybody's like, oh, well, it's sequential, right? You have, everybody agrees that the head of gold is Babylon, the chest and arms of silver are Medo Persia, and the third beast is Greece. So sequentially, you have Rome. So it's like, okay, that's the fourth beast. It's made of iron, right? Rome, their legions were like, they were the first ones that used iron. So clearly, it has to be Rome. The reason why I make a distinction, and I believe we can actually completely skip Rome, is because when you actually look at the verse, one of the indications is that this beast will be different from the rest. So it's not going to be the exact same as Babylon, Medo Persia, and Greece. Now we have to ask ourselves then, what's the same about these three kingdoms? Well, I mean, they were basically, they had emperors, they were ruled by essentially tyrants, and they were political military empire, right? They conquered their lands through subjugation by military force. Rome did the exact same thing. Actually, Rome can be said to be a lot more tolerant. They were the ones that when they would go into a place, they would actually build it up. They would build aqueducts. build up its economy, so that all those taxes could come back to Rome and they could all get fat and happy. But when it says this fourth beast is terrifying and dreadful, it has iron claws, and it's different from the rest, I think that this is better understood to be the beast that, or the empire that came after Rome, because the Islamic Caliphate was a religious empire. It's probably one of, besides the Holy Roman Empire and other empires in its time, one of the greatest theocracies there ever was. And not to mention, this religious empire at its head claims to be the rightful inheritor to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob without Jesus Christ, because they don't require Jesus Christ's sacrifice to know the Father. So essentially, you could say this great empire that came up after Rome is the single greatest religious anti-Christic empire that ever rose up, because it's essentially claiming, look, we are the true kingdom of heaven. We are, follow us and we will get you to God, Allah, without Jesus Christ's death and sacrifice. And so when we say, look, this little horn, this Antichrist is going to rise from this fourth beast that is different from the rest, this little horn is rising up from this 10-nation coalition. And I'll finish right here, not to mention that within Daniel 11 and within Daniel 9, we see that this beast comprises of the kings of Greece and the kings of Medo-Persia, right? Which Medo-Persia is Iran, Greece, Yavon, that's Asia Minor, Turkey. So I believe all the pieces fit together to show that this beast is in fact the Islamic Caliphate.
Okay, so you believe that the iron legs are the Islamic State, right?
Well, I think this is a bit confusing for some, because it talks about how there's a fundamental division. Within Daniel 7, it says his kingdom will be divided. That's essentially what we see within Islam currently, is that there's the Sunnis and there's the Shia split. And actually, when you look at the end time theologies of both of these, we see how there's this idea that the Mahdi, which for those who follow this channel, I believe that he is the Antichrist, the coming Antichrist, is going to march on Mecca, and he's going to destroy Mecca and the Kaaba. And so, like, we see the same thing in Revelation, how the beast is going to hate the harlot. So anyway, but yeah, that's what I believe.
Okay, and so how do you interpret the clay mingled with iron?
So the clay that mingles with iron is essentially this idea that, because the prophecy is towards Satan, and it's also, I believe, is towards Gog of Magog, which is, I believe, is the Antichrist. That's a whole nother subject, brother. But when it comes to the iron and the clay, God is essentially saying, look, your empire is going to be divided. It's never going to mingle, because if it mingles, it becomes this great empire that is almost undefeatable. So essentially, the last days iteration of the Islamic Caliphate is going to be a fundamental division between the Shias, which the Shia countries today are Iran. Some would say Turkey. I mean, it's kind of up in the air, but basically that kind of Iranian Persian area. And then you have the Sunnis, which comprise 81% of all Muslims, which is primarily Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. And so that's why I believe we do not see, like, especially within Ezekiel 38, we actually see Sheba and Dedan, which is Saudi Arabia, protesting and saying, look, have you come in and plunder us? And we know that Sheba and Dedan is Saudi Arabia. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, so the only thing, so it's not the only thing, but so like I said from the beginning, the major things for me is the economic, the political, and the religious power that are mingled and have multiple kings agreeing, and it's not just the 10 horns. Remember, because in Revelation, the beasts that were in Daniel 7 were now combined with the beast with the 10 horns. And so like I said, the beasts that are combined, has the feet of a bear, mouth of a lion. You have the four-headed leopard, and then you have the 10 horned beasts, and things like that. I believe that those nations actually exist today. And so
really, okay.
Yeah, so these nations are going to be combined with the European Union as superpowers because you have what you have called the big five right now, which are the superpowers of the world. You have China, you have America, and Russia, So you have five major powers, and the reason why we were given veto powers is because when they were trying to convince the United States to give some kind of sovereignty over to them, they said, "Well, we'll give you veto power. So if you vote against something, then we won't be allowed to go against it or something like that." Because
Mhm.
America was hesitant to give our sovereignty to the world government, and
Mhm.
so with the veto power, they felt a little bit more comfortable. And so the beast. So anyway, I'm about to go into a whole other thing, but
Do what you got to do.
the beasts that are in there in Daniel 7 are now combined with the 10 horn beasts. And so I don't believe that these are
Okay.
ancient. I don't believe that these are ancient beasts. I
So
believe
could
that
it,
these.
oh, I'm sorry, brother. Could you then explain what? So we see in Revelation that the seven-headed, ten-horned beast is described like a leopard, like a bear, and like a lion. So what do you think these three things symbolize, according to your view?
Yeah, so in Daniel 7, I believe that these are describing future kingdoms from Daniel's time. Yeah, so I believe that he's referring to it's referring to future kingdoms because it talks about even towards the end of the chapter, it talks about the coming of the Lord and the end of days, and things like that. And it says that these beasts will be allowed to continue on for a time. So even
Mm-hmm.
after Jesus Christ return, they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
allowed to continue on for a time. So not everybody's going to bow down to the Antichrist and worship his image, but they're also not going to obey Jesus Christ. But they're going to be those who are still alive at that time. See, like I don't hold this belief that we're dying and going to heaven. I don't believe that at all. That's to me is the new heaven is the new Jerusalem is what the
Which is
Bible
a new
teaches.
Earth. Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
and
I,
so
I agree with that.
it's not like God is like rearranging the galaxies and all this stuff. He created the earth for mankind. And
Mm-hmm.
so it says that he's going to destroy those who destroy the earth. And
Mm-hmm.
so he's wanting to create a new earth, yes, and things like that. But we're going to remain here and rule with Jesus Christ for 1,000 years. That's what the Bible teaches, that when he sets down human government, which is the rock that fell in Nebuchadnezzar's dream and knocked down the statue, that's the symbol of the kingdom of God bringing down human government. It doesn't mean the
Mm-hmm.
end of the world. The world's still going to exist. We're just going to reign with him, and we're actually going to reign as immortals. There's still going to be mortals on the earth, people who have continued to live on. And these are the people that are going to actually be deceived in the end when Satan is released again 1,000
Mm-hmm.
years later and try to make war again with Jesus Christ. Because some people say, how can you live with Jesus Christ on earth and then turn against him? Like, how is that even possible?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the mortals that we are over. And
Well, let me
so,
back up. Let me back up real quick. So
but
I,
don't let me
I
forget. Don't let
okay,
me
okay,
forget
yeah,
though.
finish
Don't let
that.
me forget about the nations that are going to continue on.
Okay, why don't you speak on that real quick then? So, what do you think
Okay,
that is?
so in Daniel 7, it says that these beasts that he's describing, the lion with eagle's wings, the four-headed leopard, the bear, right? They're going to continue to live on into the kingdom. That's why I don't believe they're ancient. I believe that they're going to be in existence at the coming of the Lord, and they're going to continue even for a time. But the only difference
So,
is that, yeah,
so you believe that the lion, leopard, and bear that are described in Daniel are not representing the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, and Grecian
mhm.
empires, but they're actually talking about the empires that will be on the earth when Jesus comes.
Yeah, and the
Okay.
reason the reason why is because it says in that same chapter that they're going to be allowed to continue for a time.
Well, yeah, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this, and I think it's important to share at least my perspective because obviously nobody's like 100% right, but from my view, I think again the key here, going back to what I was saying in the beginning, when we let the Bible kind of interpret itself, I think that's the best way that we can apply how we understand Bible prophecy. Because again, when we looked at Revelation 17, it kind of gives us the entire framework. It's the 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and we can logically trace that to what's coming. I believe we can do the same thing here in Daniel, where it describes, in Revelation, how this beast that we also see in Daniel, the 7-headed, 10-horned beast, head of a lion or the mouth of a lion, the feet of a bear, and the body of a leopard, right? I believe that's what it is. So all throughout Daniel 7, Daniel 9, and Daniel 11, it gives us, at least in my perspective, all the nations that we need to know. We pretty much know that the head of gold, which the Bible literally says, you are the head of gold. Like that's the kingdom of Babylon. Then we have the chest and arms of silver. We see all throughout Daniel talk about the kings of the Medes and the Persians. It's the two arms, the Medo-Persian Empire. Then we have the belly and brass of, or the belly of bronze, which is the Grecian Empire, right? The kings of Yavan. We even see the reason why I believe that this is also ancient is within Daniel 10. There's we have the angel of the Lord talking to the angel Gabriel, right? And the angel of the Lord's like essentially telling us, look, this next thing I'm going to tell you within the entire chapter of Daniel 11, you need to listen to this. This is about the time of the end. And so when we look at Daniel 11, we see the exact same framework of the 3 kingdoms. We have the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, and the Grecian, which is the Alexander the Great, Asia Minor majority empires. So I believe that when Revelation is saying, look, this looks like a lion, this looks like a bear, this looks like a leopard, we're supposed to use the kingdoms that Daniel was given within the framework and say, okay, we're going to put all of these kingdoms together. What type of kingdom do we get? So when you put the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, and the Grecian empires together, I'll put a map up here, you get the current borders of the former Islamic Caliphate. You don't get the borders of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire barely even got to Iran. You can even go to Iran and ask, did Rome conquer you? They will say absolutely not. And the beast of Daniel 4, the beast that comes after these 3 beasts, the lion, leopard, and bear, crushes these 3 other beasts, right? It tramples them underfoot, crushes them entirely, exceedingly terrifying. It was different from the rest. So lo and behold, the Islamic Empire under the time of Muhammad comes in, completely destroys these other empires, and forms the Islamic Caliphate within the borders of these empires. And it completely destroyed the cultures, the languages. That's why in all these areas they speak Arabic, they speak, Islamic languages. Now, to kind of answer your point, where you said, "Oh, but we actually see these nations existing into the future, right? When Jesus Christ comes and says that the lion, leopard, and bear empires are actually said to live on into the future." That's actually also seen within the prophets. How when Jesus Christ comes back, he's going to come back to Edom. He's going to come back to Basra, which is modern day Jordan, right? The surrounding nations, and he's going to utterly destroy the surrounding peoples that come against Jerusalem in the last days. But these nations, right, which is like Iran, pretty much everything I've already said, are still going to exist into the millennium. He's still going to allow Iran, Turkey, and all of these nations to exist within the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Because, and this is where I'll kind of end it here for my point, remember how we saw the 7th king is of the 8th? Well, the 8th king is the one that comes in all the way at the end of the millennium. And when the millennium happens, what's going to happen? Satan is going to rise out of his prison. He's going to go out to the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. Here's the connection. And he's going to gather the nations to gather against Jerusalem for one last final assault, whereby Jesus Christ will physically himself rain fire down from heaven. That's the connection, is that these Islamic nations are going to exist within the millennium. Jesus is going to allow it. He's going to rule the nations. Then Satan is going to be released one last time to deceive them, like, oh, like I'm Allah, and here's the Mahdi again, and actually you were deceived. That was Dajjal, and this is like, and it kind of goes into a whole discussion. But they're all going to believe that they were believing in a false, they were believing in a false Jesus Christ, and I mean, that's kind of its own thing. But does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're coming from. I don't think that what I'm saying is contradictory. I think that you're viewing these things to be different empires. I than what I see them as, and so what I like say. So, for example, like the three beasts in Daniel 7, I don't see that being a problem with these other empires. These are just identifiers for the way I'm reading it, is just identifiers of the nations that's going to be in the earth on that day. And you pretty much agree that those nations will exist. Uh, that's what it sounded like to me, that they're going to continue, whether it's Iran or what all these other ones.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just interpreting them to be different nations.
Yeah.
And so one part is this is why I believe it has to be the Holy Roman Empire. Is because, okay, so for the economic reason, like I told you, the religious reason, I don't see that it's possible for the Muslim world to dominate nations and tongues and things like that, because they're like the most dogmatic religion there is. I don't ever see them compromising their faith. So with the Pope, he's all about interfaithism. He's all about things like that. So like he can go to. My wife is from Colombia, and the Pope went there not too long ago, and people just go nuts over the Pope. And so the Pope goes there. So this is the many waters that I believe the interpretation of it's many peoples, tongues, and nations. This is the power that the Catholic Church has over them, because he's all about interfaithism. They don't believe in dogmatic religion where you say you have to believe what I believe or you're not saved. They're trying to abolish that. So like, you see it, you probably see it all the time, the bumper stickers of all the different symbols of religion that are on people. Yeah, coexist. Because that's the spirit that is trying to take over the world. We all worship the same God. There's just different ways to get to him. President Bush said that when he announced, when his father is the one that actually had the meeting to announce the New World Order after the Berlin Wall fell. But his son George Bush said the same thing. He says, "Oh yeah, Muslims, everybody, we're all going to heaven." And so that's why I can't see the Muslim for that reason, for the religious reason, unless and I get your point. You want to view it just as Middle Eastern issue, and I do understand what your point is, that I really do, but I can't see them having the economic ability, because for example, the European Union has spent over 100 years trying to get this going, and they have just now, like 10 years ago, got it finally. They finally got a constitution. And so for Muslim, I believe we're in the last days now. And so if the Muslims, they would have to do, I mean, it would be a miracle thing for them to be able to have a currency that are shared within the nations of the world. And so not just the Islamic world. And I do know Islam is a force to be reckoned with in the end days. I don't take that away. I know that that's true, because I do believe of that. We see Islam in the Bible, because I can never. They're too dogmatic. They're way too dogmatic.
Yeah, this is something that I honestly was dealing with myself when I first came to this, idea or whatever. This is something a lot of Christians deal with. Is they're like, oh, how, like, even if I agree that, okay, so let's say Daniel's talking about a Middle East beast, let's say Revelation, everything makes sense. All the prophets are speaking of the surrounding nations. How could it make sense that Islam is going to be the one that rises up to control the global economy, to essentially, establish the mark of the beast, to do all these things? And like, I get that. That's something that's really hard. I think this idea of the New World Order, right, again, is a really American Christian idea. I believe that this is something that is, this idea that, the mark of the beast, every single human being on the earth, like from down to like all the way down to Bangladesh, all the way down to all the way up north in Canada are going to have to take this mark of the beast. I don't believe that. I believe that the majority of this this empire that's going to rise up is going to be mainly in the Middle East, and it's going to trickle out into the kings of the earth. You know what I mean? But that's definitely a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that I see what you're saying, but that's what I'm saying. Like you would have to only view it as a Middle Eastern thing because
I don't think that's necessarily true. And let me and I mean sorry for interrupting, but let me give you my perspective because like for one, we have to understand that Islam currently, like unitarily, is the second largest and most influential religious system ever. Right? There's
mhm,
currently 1.9 billion Muslims, and there's so many projections talking about how Islam, even within my generation, possibly could overtake Christianity as a whole.
mhm,
Catholicism only accounts for a certain percentage of
mhm.
Christians, whereas most Protestants wouldn't have anything to do with the Pope. You know what I mean? Whereas Islam already, actually, if you really put the statistics together, outperforms Catholicism. Now, that's not to say like, oh, it's a performance game, but I'm just kind of giving you statistics for you to understand.
Yeah, yeah, and I do see your point with that. But
Yeah,
so here's where things might start getting offensive for some viewers or maybe even you. I don't know.
go for
But
it.
but so when it comes to the harlot, the mystery Babylon or whatever, um, it describes her as not just the harlot but the mother of harlots.
Mm-hmm.
And so I view that as a system. Like so, if you go into church today, and I'm not trying to discourage if you're new at church and all that stuff. I'm not trying to discourage you from going to church or any. I'm not trying to do any of
Yeah,
that. But
please, please go to church. Please go
yeah,
to
I'm not
church.
I'm not encouraging that at all. But
Okay.
I'm trying to make a point and make us aware that I believe that we're still coming out of this system. And so there's things and traditions that have been passed down that slowly we keep breaking a little bit more free, a little bit more free, just certain mindsets, certain you got to understand that it says that she led them astray, led the nations astray by her divination, by her spells. So
Mhm.
we can be caught in a spell a lot of times, and we think, "Oh, this is what church is. This is what." But when you actually read the scriptures and see how church was done and how they lived and things like that, we don't see that today.
Mhm.
We think that church is, you go to church on Sunday and
So I agree with all this. However, I do want us to point out that there really, really is a stark contrast between what's happening within what you would call, like at least in this discussion, the pagan church, right? Like, some, Eastern Orthodox, some Catholic church, and what's happening within Islam. Because, when you talk about Mystery Babylon being the mother of harlotry, being the mother of all of the immorality, I can't say the first part because I'll probably get banned, but the
well, I'm
mother of
saying
that type of immorality. Go
I
ahead.
would say that. So let me just clarify what I mean by the
Okay.
the, the
Okay.
mother of harlots. So I would consider her daughters all of our denominational problems that we have today.
Oh,
They
okay.
view ourselves. We all view ourselves as Christians, but we believe different things, and now we've separated into different denominations. I believe these are the daughters because
Mhm,
all of them have been broken off from the Catholic
mhm.
Church in
And
some
so
form or
obviously
another.
I would disagree with that because I believe that, from what I've been saying, but to kind of bring it back to what you were saying within, being the mother of abominations, we have to look at what the differences are because when you look at the spirit of the Antichrist, according to I believe it's First John, I can't remember the specific verse, I'll have it right here, but the spirit of the Antichrist is described as specifically denying the Father and the Son. Okay. And if you look at the Catholic Church, and we could discuss this, but let me finish this point. There isn't a fundamental denial of the relationship between the Father and the Son. There just isn't. And, there could be a case be made like, oh, in the future, he will deny the Father and claim to be the vicar of Christ. But when we look at Islam, the religion literally is saying you can have your way to the Father, the same Father that gave the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but you can do it without the Son. And so I think the stronger form, the more visceral form of this false, the mother of harlotry is happening within the religion of Islam because Again, we're given a progression within Revelation 17. When we look at Babylon, it's a progression, right? It started in Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then it finds its ultimate final fulfillment in Mystery Babylon the Great, the city, right? It's literally called the city. And so, like, and I want to ask my audience to really ask yourself, if you believe that the Roman Catholic Church is the epitome of satanic deception that is going to, in the last days, come again and is going to deceive the world, I want you to really have your eyes on what's happening to 1.9 billion people in the world currently, because they currently believe that you can find your way to the Father without the Son. Like, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does totally make sense. But I also don't believe that the only nations that God is concerned about is the Middle East. So when he's giving these prophecies, he had to pick a nation, and the seed had to come from there, but I don't believe that he's looking at the nations and he's like, oh man, all these other Gentiles, they're just trash. We're not even going to consider these people. We're only going to focus on the Middle Eastern. I don't believe that. I'm not saying that that's the way you're viewing it, but I do believe that there's significance in the beast, like I said in Daniel 7, when it comes to the lion, the leopard, and all these other things. And I believe they're in the earth today. And
well, let me ask you a question, and this is related. What exactly is the Catholic Church deceiving us today on? Like, to you, what is the foundational antichristic spirit of
the Catholic Church itself, the Catholic Church itself right now, it's more of a tool for Satan to use to cause the people to believe in the Antichrist that's coming. So it's not necessarily like a particular belief of what they believe, but I do believe that the Catholic Church, so we're probably going to disagree with this because I think most people are Trinitarian. I'm not Trinitarian. And so,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so I believe that the Trinitarian doctrine was developed later. And so and it was actually established with I kind of believe in the Trinity, but just not in the same way. I don't believe in three persons and all that language. That stuff came later. Mm-hmm. And so I view them as, if you look up an encyclopedia, you can Google it. When you read the Bible and you look at Matthew 28:19, and Jesus says, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, things like that. Mm-hmm. Notice that nobody ever baptized in that way in the book of Acts or even in the epistles. Nobody, not even one time, was baptized that way. And when you do a Google search and you search it out, you will see that even the Catholic's own encyclopedia says that the Trinitarian formula of baptism was changed from Jesus' name baptism to the Trinitarian form. And there's about 10 different dictionaries on this. So you can Google that and see. So here's the thing with me. So the Trinitarian, the Catholic Church, the Pope came out in like 1960s, when all the inclusiveness and the problems was happening in the 60s between men and women and all these different political issues. The Pope came out and said, we do not agree with the practices of the Protestant churches, but they still have not forsaken our formula, our form of baptism. And so in order to be considered a Catholic, you have to be baptized in the way that they want you to, which is in the Trinitarian formula. And so they said, since you have not forsaken that one thing of the baptism, then you are welcome home as our daughters. I don't know exactly the quote, but the Pope came out I think it's 1964 and made that declaration to unify the nations, or unify the beginning of unifying the religion. So you have the one movement that's trying to unify all the Christian denominations and make them, like, don't be so dogmatic and this and that. And then it's not only that, but then outside of Christianity, they're trying to mingle and unify all the other religions as well in the world. And because
the master plan, for, according to your view, is essentially to unify the world into some sort of religion under the Pope.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, and the Pope is going to point, and it talks about how he's going to do miracles and things like that because the beast gave him the power, right?
Yeah, Satan gives the beast. Yeah, the dragon gave the beast the
authority. Yeah, right. And so he's going to deceive them because of that, and then he's going to say, follow this man. But even in the end, the Antichrist he don't like the Catholic religion. It says he's not going to even consider the gods of his fathers. And so so that's the way I see that. It's just a matter of interpretation. Here's the cool thing, though. The cool thing about me and your differences on this is that there's really not a way. Well, here, let me clarify this. Do you believe in a third temple being built?
I believe that there will be some sort of altar structure. I'm kind of loose when it comes to the third temple specifically, but I believe there will be something built.
So, but do you believe that, so like say the Muslim Messiah, do you believe that it's going to be clear whenever he presents himself?
Well, the Bible, well, what do you mean by that? It's going to be
clear. Well, clear for you. Clear for you. Yeah, that he's the Antichrist.
I mean, for me, I believe, there's a lot of indicating factors. I believe there, when you understand the fundamental prophecies of Daniel, Revelation, stuff like that, you will know when the Antichrist is here, primarily due to Jesus' own warnings of the abomination of desolation. So right. I believe so.
Okay, so because of that, so whether it's a temple, an altar, or whatever, whoever we see that does that, we know that that's going to be the Antichrist. So if he's a Muslim Messiah, that because of what my understanding of Scripture, if one day I see a Muslim guy stand on the temple and claim to be God, right? Then I'm going to know that's him. Jericho was right.
Yeah.
And so the same thing, like if you see someone do that, but he's not Muslim, you have to accept that as well. So like,
yeah,
that's the thing. Like, so some things about end time prophecy, I think can be salvational issues. When you get so like, oh, I'm right and everybody else is wrong, because when prophecies begin to fulfill and it's different than what you believe, then you will be in denial and say, oh no, because it has to be done the way I think it's going to be done. So because some people can be so like, if we're not taken away, then it can't be the Antichrist because we're going to be raptured before the Antichrist comes. So it can't be the mark of the beast. Yeah. If you're so like adamant about, a pre-tribulation rapture, then you can be deceived by that because you're so honed in on there's a pre-tribulation rapture, and then you're going to get the mark of the beast, and you're going to believe you didn't.
To my audience, please be praying for us, man, because even at the start of this channel, I've had so much spiritual warfare, stuff happen. It's like you don't even realize like what's going on behind the scenes, but we really are in the last days, and it, like to what you were saying, if the Antichrist turns out to be a Muslim, or he turns out to be a Roman Catholic leader, or he turns out to be a Hindu, you know what I mean? We still need to be in the scriptures, and we need to be looking at, okay, what do we as Christians need to be looking out for? In Matthew 24, he talks about, see that nobody leads you astray. False Christ, false messiahs will arise. The abomination of desolation. These are things that we as Christians need to be focusing on because honestly, the time is short and we need to be ready.